What is up, my dude and dudettes, and welcome back to TellerTube. In today's video, we're going to be looking at one of my favorite subreddits, r/Prorevenge. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date with my latest videos, and with that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. I got fired. Employers' lawyers should have done their homework. I did. So this happened to me about 20 years ago while in college. I am being deliberately vague because reasons. Background: I got a job basically office sitting on weekends. I showed up at 8 a.m. and every hour I checked over things, handling the occasional phone call, and then left when the 4 p.m. person arrived. Most of the time I read, watched TV, or played games on my laptop. I probably worked no more 10 minutes of every hour unless something went wrong. It went on like this for years. The pay was decent, holidays were double pay, and I even had opportunities to cover weekday shifts when others were sick. One day, while I was covering the midday shift, my boss asked me to come into his office. He told me that the evening weekday position was going to become available that night. He offered me the position, which I accepted. I was told to punch out and return at 5 p.m. that night. The reason it went down like this should be obvious. Things went okay for a while. I showed up at 4 p.m., did the normal things, and then left at 12 a.m. when my relief arrived. It was a little more work, more call volumes, etc. Then, after 9 months, things started to go south. The daytime person developed a huge attitude problem and went from a nice person to a total Karen. She would complain about everything I did. For example, one time, a system jammed up at a remote site and she called them. 5 hours later, I saw the jam was still there, so I called that site again to see if they were still working on it, or if something else was wrong because the woman on our end who would be the one to help them was leaving soon. They did have a problem, and so I hooked them up. My reward for making sure the problem got solved and not having to bother an upper-level employee at home on a Friday just after having left work. I got yelled at because Karen complained that I had apparently ignored her log entry about the issue. My defense was ignored. The boss had me highlight important things on the log to verify that I had read them. Things plodded on for a while with this new normal. I tiptoed around Karen when needed, thankful for the fact I only had to deal with her for no more than 5 minutes. I did the stupid highlighting thing and my log entry started getting more and more detailed, even referencing Karen's call when I had to follow up on an issue that crossed shifts. The firing. The following summer, just after I crossed the year mark, I went on vacation to visit some friends out of state. When I got back after about a week, my boss came down after everyone had left and had me describe how I did a certain task which involved certain updates. I explained to him how I did it and so forth. He then told me that I had not been doing it at all and that he was firing me. I had transposed the date code of the English file for the French file, which was the previous one. The newest one had already been applied anyways, so nothing was wrong. It was just a reason to get rid of me. So, I left the office. My state is an at-will employment state, which means that I can quit at any time for any reason, and my employer can terminate me at any time for any reason. The only exceptions were state and federal laws such as race, religion, etc. I thought I was screwed, so I just started applying everywhere I could. During my job search, I happened to accidentally stumble upon a link about employment law. Out of curiosity, I read it and discover that my employer had shot themselves in the foot. In the employee handbook, there was a job security clause. What this stated was that they would never lay us off and such if our jobs were eliminated. We would simply be retrained and sent to fill an opening elsewhere in the company. It sounds good, but it resulted in them cooking up reasons to fire people to get around it. But their fancy, high-priced lawyers had missed something. In my state's law, the ones passed by the legislator, I was screwed because of the at-will. What they neglected was case law, the ones determined by courts. This site cited a case from the state Supreme Court that had ruled that a job security clause waived at will on the employer side, turning it into a just cause relationship. This means that they had to have a real reason to fire me. Now the revenge. With that in hand, I sought out a lawyer. After my consultation with her, I set about collecting my evidence. My former boss did not realize that I knew more about this program than he did, seeing as I ran the same software on my own computer and laptop. I experimented. The date of the file, which they tried to use against me, is baked into the version 2. I was able to demonstrate to my lawyer that if I applied the same update over and over, which my former employer stated would change the date every day, would, in reality, display the date of the file. I showed this by backdating my own copy by a year using the updated archive available from the vendor. Next, I showed her how the task used to be automated. A script would snag the file and process it every day on its own. A change on the vendor's site broke the script. It was an easy fix, but no one bothered to do it because the guy who had wrote it retired. The fix involved deleting 3 characters on one line in the script. The task was also marked as only being a weekday task. In my firing, I was told how important this update was and so forth. If it was so important, why is it not done on weekends or holidays? The vendors pushed out updates on those days too, as I showed my lawyer the one from Christmas morning. And why had the automation not been fixed? With all that in hand, she contacted them. After presenting them with the law they broke and all the evidence I had collected, they were forced to settle with me. So in the end, their fancy high-priced lawyers did not do their homework. I did. Thank you to the wonderful librarians I have known in my life who taught me my information literacy skills. They paid dividends in this case. Welcome back, but you're fired. Oh really? Are you sure about that one, Chief? Revenge on evil landlord. When I was in university, I'd heard stories about horrible landlords of student housing but hadn't experienced it myself. Until 3rd year, when it felt like we got 3 years worth of crappy landlords all in one go. It began when I heard noises in the wall behind my bed at night. I brushed it off for a while until I realized it was an animal in the wall. I told the landlords the next day and they immediately played dumb, acting as if I was stupid in front of my housemates for suggesting that something could fit inside of a wall. That was the first alarm bell. Why immediately try to embarrass me into dropping it? After explaining that I know what a cavity wall is, she asked if we'd seen anything in the kitchen. Oddly specific, we didn't think about it until later. From then on, her husband dealt with us. We weren't aware that he was our landlord too. A little time passes, still nothing done about the noise in my wall, not that it was a surprise. I'd worked out by then that it was probably something like a mouse and that it could run through the terrace of the houses. As long as it didn't chew its way through my wall or die in there, I put the whole thing on the back burner. Until we were all sat in the sitting room and heard a thud in the kitchen. Then squeaking, there was a giant rat in our kitchen. The rat disappeared into a hole in the completely crumbling kitchen wall and the landlord claimed that we made it up. In that they'd never had a rodent problem. I contacted the previous tenants through Facebooking names I found on letters for them that had been posted to us by mistake. The property had had a rat problem for the last 3 years before we moved in at least. I set a rat trap and caught one, took photos and sent them to the landlord to tell him to sort the problem out. He told us that because there was a line in our contract about the landlord not paying for pest control, the contract specified wasp nest, etc. We didn't even think about rats when we signed it, that we'd have to pay the hundreds of pounds to fix it. He'd knowingly written that into our contract so he wouldn't have to pay instead of fixing the kitchen wall and the exterior wall where the rats were getting in. To cut the rest of the setting the scene part of the story short, we called the council who sent a pest control team. While on their visit, one of the men took my housemate to one side and told her that our landlord is evil and he is known for getting nasty. They told him that it wasn't our fault that there were rats, it was his, and he screamed in my face until he was bright red about how I was a terrible person and was trying to take him down for no reason. One of my housemates had to leave because she was scared. I wasn't. We were in a room full of men who were backing us up, making himself look worse for screaming in my face like that. I'm female and was 22 at the time, about half his size. He tried to sue us for slander. It isn't slander if it's true, so swing and a miss. Now for the revenge. It was written in our contract that we had to be notified 24 hours in advance if anyone needed access to the house, which included house viewings. I began my mission, stop any other students from getting stuck in this hellhole. The house was being shown by agents, so it made it fairly easy. I left the rat traps in prominent places, casually explaining why we needed them if asked. And if I felt I was being too subtle, making a fake show of, oh gosh, please ignore the rat traps. The landlord said he'd fix the kitchen wall where they get in but hasn't gotten around to it, so we have to catch them. I was honest about the mold problem in the bathroom. When I found out they were planning on increasing the rent by £100 a month, I made a point of saying something like, well, it's just about worth the rent I was paying. I made sure to use his name so they wouldn't get away with using his wife's name as a front while his reputation for aggression stayed hidden. The agents never said anything to me directly, and because we had to be notified, I could always make sure I was home when there was a viewing. My housemates fully supported my revenge, but I was the woman of action in the house. When I'm sure I'm in the right, I will do what's necessary to make things right. That was until they tried to turn up unannounced one day, not even knocking, just unlocked our front door and walked in. Luckily, I was in the house and kicked them out for not informing us and told them that they were in breach of our contract. If the crappy landlord could use it to beat us with, two can play at that game. No new tenants have signed for the house by the time we were free of that hellhole. It's been 2 years now though, so I have no idea what happened to the rat house. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I'd probably do the same thing. So, you're not gonna fix the wall, eh, Chief? Fine, I'll just tell everybody about the rat infestation. How's that, donkey? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, smash that like button as it would really help me out. Subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date with my latest videos, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.